After years of living under the oppressive rule of the HOA, they finally crossed the line when they raised my fees just because I had too many vehicles in my own driveway. What they didn't know was that I had been quietly buying up properties in this neighborhood for years. And now, it was time to show Jessica Harper, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, who really owned this place. But would she surrender gracefully? Welcome to my channel. Subscribe if you want to hear more thrilling stories about HOAs and Karens. I never wanted trouble with the HOA, I swear. But when I saw the bright orange violation notice stuck to my front door on Tuesday morning, I knew the war had begun. My hands shook as I read the words. Immediate HOA fee increase, $500 per month. Violation, excessive vehicles on property. 3 cars. That was all. A truck I needed for my construction work, my wife's SUV for her night shifts at the hospital, and an old Honda we bought for our daughter's 16th birthday. 3 completely reasonable vehicles in our own driveway. I glanced out the kitchen window and saw Jessica Harper, the HOA queen, taking her morning stroll, clipboard in hand, pink measuring tape dangling from her wrist. She stopped in front of my house, pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures. Again. This was the 3rd time this week. "Honey, she's out there again," my wife, Emily, called from the living room. "Maybe we should just park the Honda in the garage?" "No way," I said firmly, pouring my coffee. "We shouldn't have to hide our daughter's car like we've done something wrong, and the garage is already packed with your medical equipment and my tools." We had explained this in the last HOA meeting, and I still remembered the smug smile Jessica gave me when I brought it up. "Rules are rules, Mr. Carter," she had said without even looking up from her phone. "If you can't meet the parking requirements, maybe this neighborhood isn't for you." But what Jessica didn't know was that I had been quietly acquiring properties in this area for the past 5 years. Every time a house went up for sale, I used different companies to buy it. At first, it was just a smart investment strategy. But now, it was a mission. As I walked outside to check the mail, deliberately taking my time, Jessica pretended to inspect Mrs. Anderson's fence, but I caught her stealing glances my way. Poor Mrs. Anderson. Last month she got fined because her roses were too vibrant, disrupting the neighborhood color harmony. My phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. "Deal finalized. You now own 67% of the neighborhood." I smirked, sliding my phone back into my pocket, just as Jessica marched over, hugging her clipboard to her chest. "Mr. Carter," she cooed, her voice as sweet as artificial sugar. "I trust you've received the notice about your vehicle violation?" "Yes, Jessica," I said, keeping my tone calm and professional, "and I have some questions about the legal basis for this fee increase." She waved a hand dismissively. "The board has full authority to impose necessary fees. Maybe if you attended more HOA meetings, you'd understand how things work." What she didn't know was that I had attended every HOA meeting for the past 5 years, through proxies representing my various properties. I had quietly documented every single one of Jessica's money-grabbing schemes, every ridiculous fee, every abuse of power. As she turned away, her heels clicking against the pavement, she threw one last comment over her shoulder. "Oh, by the way, the board is holding an emergency meeting tonight at 7 p.m. We'll be discussing additional measures for problematic properties." I checked my watch. 6 hours until the meeting. Jessica wanted to play games with me over 3 cars? She had no idea who she was messing with. I stepped into the community meeting hall and immediately felt the tension in the air. Jessica had really outdone herself this time. She had even hired a professional photographer to take exaggerated pictures of my driveway, making 3 normal vehicles look like a junkyard. "Let's begin," Jessica said, slamming her pink glittery gavel onto the podium. She had scheduled this emergency or meeting for a Tuesday evening, knowing most families would be too busy to attend. But I was there, sitting in the back row, watching. As you can see in these professionally taken photos, she clicked her PowerPoint remote, Mr. Carter's property has essentially become an illegal parking lot. She went on, displaying charts about property value decline, anonymous neighbor complaints, probably from her little inner circle, and even a weather report, claiming my cars caused excessive snow buildup on the street. Finally, she pulled out a thick binder. I have been tracking every vehicle entering and exiting Mr. Carter's house for the past 3 months. I raised an eyebrow. She's been surveilling my family? Some of the neighbors started murmuring uncomfortably. That's when I stood up. Point of order, Madam President. I walked toward the front, holding up a file of my own. You are not allowed to speak, Mr. Carter. Really? According to HOA bylaws section 7.3, any homeowner may question voting procedures before a decision is made. And before we vote, I think everyone should be aware of the current ownership structure of the HOA. I unrolled a massive cow neighborhood property map onto the table. In the past 5 years, Sunrise Properties has acquired a majority stake in this neighborhood. And as the CEO of Sunrise Properties, I'm pleased to announce that I now own the majority of this HOA. The room exploded with murmurs. Jessica's face went pale. Her hands trembled as she reached for her water bottle, knocking over her glittery gavel. The board members sat in stunned silence. It was time to change the rules of the game. I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice remained steady. Jessica's smug smile began to fade as I opened my briefcase. Before we vote on these new fees, I said, I have something important to share with everyone. I pulled out a thick stack of property deeds and started placing them on the table one by one, like I was dealing cards in a high-stakes poker game. The room buzzed with whispers as I arranged them in neat rows. For the past 5 years, I continued, I've watched this HOA board ignore real maintenance issues while terrorizing good neighbors over the pettiest infractions. I've seen Jessica fine Mrs. Anderson, an 82-year-old, for having a flower pot 1 inch too tall. Meanwhile, her friend Susan's blindingly purple fence has never received a single warning. Jessica's face flushed red. That's not true. I enforce all rules fairly. She grabbed her water bottle, but her hand trembled, splashing water onto her designer blouse. I clicked the meeting room's big screen. Here's Jessica measuring my lawn at 3 a.m. last Tuesday. The security camera footage was crystal clear. Several people gasped. And here she is completely ignoring the Carter's violations right after they hired her son's landscaping company. Murmurs rippled through the room. I saw heads nodding as people recalled their own run-ins with Jessica's selective enforcement. But the most interesting thing I discovered, I said, picking up the stack of deeds, is that, through my company, Sunrise Properties, I now own 67% of the homes in this development. I paused for dramatic effect. That makes me the majority owner of this HOA. Jessica shot up, knocking over her chair. You can't do that. It's not allowed. Her voice went up half an octave. I smiled. Actually, I can. I had 3 different law firms verify everything. It's completely legal. I pulled out another folder. I also have signed complaints from 32 residents about harassment, selective enforcement, and, let's call it, creative fee collection. The room erupted. Mrs. Anderson stood up, her voice shaking. Last winter, they fined me $200 for not shoveling my walkway fast enough. I was in the hospital with pneumonia. More people spoke up, sharing their stories. Jessica banged her gavel furiously, but no one was listening anymore. I moved to dissolve the current board, I announced. We'll hold new elections with term limits and actual ethics. No more 3 a.m. lawn inspections, no more HOA dictatorship. Robert from 2 doors down raised his hand. I second that motion. Hands shot up across the room. Jessica grabbed her designer purse and stormed toward the door. "This meeting is adjourned," she shrieked. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." "Actually," I said, still calm, "according to HOA bylaws, Section 7.3, a meeting requires a majority vote to adjourn, and I don't think you have that anymore." I gestured toward the deeds spread across the table. "We're just getting started." She froze, her hand on the doorknob, realizing her iron grip over the neighborhood was slipping away. "Now," I said, opening another folder, "let's talk about those mysterious pool renovation fees from last summer. The ones where $50,000 disappeared, yet the pool remains suspiciously unfixed. I have some interesting bank records to share." Jessica leaned against the wall, her face pale. She hadn't noticed yet, but a local news van had just pulled into the parking lot. I had invited them to cover our community reorganization meeting. The next few hours would change our neighborhood forever, but first, we had years of Jessica's secrets to unravel, and I had every receipt. On Monday morning, I walked into my lawyer's office and found 20 angry voicemails from Jessica. Apparently, she had spent the weekend uncovering my company's property records and was now threatening to sue me for, get this, secretly taking over the neighborhood. I couldn't help but smile. She had finally revealed her true colors, but Jessica wasn't just angry, she was scared. That evening, she went door to door, spreading rumors that I was planning to turn our peaceful suburb into a parking lot for my car collection. Some neighbors actually believed her, especially after she flashed some hilariously fake documents claiming I was working with a shady developer. I knew I had to act fast. My security cameras caught Jessica sneaking onto my property at midnight, snapping photos of my car's license plates like she was conducting a high-level FBI investigation. The next day, she filed a lawsuit, accusing me of violating HOA rules by purchasing properties through my company. She even tried to get an emergency court order to freeze my voting rights in the HOA. That's when my months of careful planning paid off. My lawyer unveiled our secret weapon: a detailed record of every HOA meeting for the past 5 years. We had videos of Jessica letting her friends off the hook for violations while slamming others with absurd fines. We had checks showing she had used HOA funds to renovate her own backyard. Best of all, we had emails where she bragged about using her power to keep undesirable elements out of the neighborhood. The judge's eyes widened as we played time-stamped footage of Jessica measuring my lawn with a ruler at 3 a.m., photographing my teenage daughter's car, and placing threatening notes on neighbors' doors. Her lawyer started sweating when we presented proof that she had altered HOA records to hide unpaid dues for her inner circle. But the real bombshell came when 3 former board members stepped forward. They testified that Jessica had bullied them into approving ridiculous rules, admitted to targeting homeowners she didn't like, and even bragged about funding her yearly trips to Hawaii with HOA fines. The courtroom went silent when we pulled up Jessica's social media. There she was, lounging poolside in Maui, captioning a photo. "Thanks to all my rule-breaking neighbors for funding this vacation. Keep those fines coming." Jessica tried to defend herself, claiming she was just enforcing order. Then we played an audio recording from last month's HOA meeting, where she had screamed at Mrs. Anderson, our 75-year-old neighbor, for having a bird feeder 2 inches too low. That's when Jessica completely lost it. She jumped up, pointing her finger at me. "He's trying to destroy our perfect neighborhood," she shrieked. "Do you know what kind of people will move in if we don't have strict rules? He probably wants to turn this into one of those communities where people can park wherever they want." The judge had heard enough. He not only removed Jessica from the HOA board, but also ordered her to reimburse all the ridiculous fees she had collected. The look on her face when she heard the total amount, $14,789.92, was more satisfying than any revenge I could have planned. She clutched her designer handbag like it was a life raft, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. With my majority ownership, we rebuilt the HOA from the ground up. We elected 5 new board members from different parts of the neighborhood, including Mrs. Martinez, whom Jessica had fined for her grandson parking in front of her house for 5 minutes, and Mr. Chen, whose stunning garden Jessica had declared too non-traditional. Changes happened fast. Kids could finally play basketball in their driveways without fear of clipboard-wielding tyrants. Vegetable gardens were welcomed, and most importantly, families could park more than 2 cars as long as they fit within their own space, something that should have been obvious to any rational person. 3 weeks later, I watched from my porch as Jessica's moving truck pulled up. She had sent a dramatic farewell letter to the entire neighborhood, claiming she was moving to a community with proper standards. No one missed the irony when we noticed a fresh parking violation stuck to her windshield from her new HOA. My daughter parked her car in our driveway that evening, right next to my work truck and Emily's SUV. I installed a small sign we had all voted on. "Welcome to Carter Hills, where good neighbors make good neighborhoods." The next morning, I got an unexpected call. A TV producer had seen the news coverage and wanted to make a documentary about how we had transformed our HOA. As I looked outside at kids playing freely and neighbors chatting over garden fences, I imagined Jessica watching it from her new house, one where the HOA had a strict 1 car per driveway rule. The best part? Property values shot up by 15% in the first month after Jessica left. Turns out, people actually prefer living in a neighborhood where they're treated with respect instead of fear. Some of Jessica's former allies even stopped by to apologize, admitting they had just been afraid of becoming her next target. We still have an HOA, but now it actually serves the community instead of terrorizing it. Each month, we use the fees for things that truly matter: fixing the pool, improving the playground, helping elderly residents maintain their homes. We even turned Jessica's favorite yard violation stakeout spot into a community garden. As I filed away the last of the court documents, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jessica's new neighborhood watch group. They were asking for advice on dealing with their own power-hungry HOA president. I leaned back in my chair, grinning. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing people how to stand up for themselves.